Hey folks!
We're in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, which is one of 3 towns on Aquidneck Island, the other 2 being Middletown and Newport. We're on Route 138 in Portsmouth, and St. Mary's Cemetery. Nearby is St. Mary's Episcopal Church, just off in the distance. And this is a lovely old English-style cemetery, stonework and style of church. Beautiful to come out to visit. And we are at the Easton plot, which contains Margaret Hays Easton and her husband, Dr. Charles Daniel Easton. He has a large white granite cross, which needs a good cleaning. And Miss Hays' stone, Mrs. Easton, I should say, was covered with mud. So we've tried our best to clear that up a little bit so you can read the inscription.
We always try to come prepared, folks.
Tell us about Miss Hays, Mike.
Well, Miss Hays was traveling abroad with her good friend Olive Potter Earnshaw and her mother Lily. Olive's marriage was breaking down, so they figured it would be good to get away and forget. So they decided on the return trip to book the Titanic, but following Margaret was a young man from Albany named Gilbert Tucker. And he had fallen for Margaret and decided to court her on the way home. And they had a very nice voyage together. You know, their cabins were almost side by side. And after the Titanic struck the iceberg, you know, they fully dressed, and Margaret gathered her little Pomeranian, put it in a blanket, and all of them entered the very first lifeboat. And it took her a while to be able to talk about the actual disaster itself because she was kept busy. But when she did, she, lamented that the band wasn't given a chance to escape. She thought that was very unfair, and one of her chief memories was that the propeller was silhouetted against the horizon. But she's well known for taking care of 2 young boys, and Shelley actually knew one of those boys very well.
That would be Michel. In high school, you wonder why you need to take a foreign language. I was never so happy to have taken French as when there was a need for an interpreter for Michel, who had very little to no English, and I got to know him. He was a wonderful man, philosopher, very learned, and over the years we kept in touch. I think one of my greatest Titanic experiences has got to be when I was in Halifax, and we were on board the Island Breeze, I think was the name of the ship. I think that was, 1996?
Yeah.
And I was able to organize a mass on board the ship. We found a crewman who could make a priest stole, and I took Mr. Navratil out to the cemetery. To
Halifax.
In
Baron
Halifax.
de Hirsch? Yeah, I think he's buried in the Jewish cemetery,
Oh, he
even
is. Yes,
though
he
he's
is.
not Jewish.
He is,
yeah.
but I was able to walk Michel to the grave, and of course he and his father had not been together since that night on the deck, and we had asked the TV crews not to film. It was a touching moment, I'll never forget it. And he knelt at the grave and just said, "Papa."
That's very sad.
There wasn't a dry eye. And so we're leaving a rose today
Yeah,
for Miss Hays from Michel Navratil.
yes. And you actually had a chance to introduce Michel Navratil to Miss Hays' daughter.
I did. Peggy Starbuck had come to a lecture I had organized in Westerly where we had Marshall Drew, who at the end couldn't attend. He ended up in the hospital. But Mrs. Marjorie Newell, gave a lecture. And Margaret's daughter, Peggy Starbuck, attended. And that was the first time I had met her. So there have been some connections with the family over the years, and some unforgettable ones with Margaret's little protege, Michel.